Most of us live in a constant state of reaction. We move from one external demand to the next, ending each day with a sense of mental exhaustion that feels impossible to overcome. We usually interpret this fatigue as a personal failure, a lack of willpower, or a weakness of character. We assume that if we just tried harder, we would find the discipline we're missing. Biology suggests otherwise. For millions of years, the human brain evolved for energy efficiency and immediate survival. It is hard-coded to prioritize the quickest reward with the lowest possible effort. This biological impulse is reinforced by what Friedrich Nietzsche called herd morality, a social system that rewards obedience and punishes those who step outside the group's predictable rules. When you try to force discipline through sheer willpower, you are fighting both your evolutionary history and your social conditioning. Building a mind that does not bend requires moving past motivation and into the deliberate construction of internal and external systems. Highly consistent people don't actually possess more motivation than you do. They simply refuse to engage in a daily war with their brain's preference for ease. They utilize choice architecture, the practice of organizing a physical space so that a specific behavior becomes the most accessible path for the brain to follow. Through behavioral engineering, hiding distractions and placing tools in plain sight makes goals the path of least resistance. Automate further through habit stacking. Anchoring new actions to existing routines bypasses mental costs. Stretching after closing your laptop creates momentum without emotional energy. When these structural microhabits are integrated into your environment, discipline stops being a struggle of the will. It becomes a natural consequence of the system you live in. While physical habits provide the structure for your day, your social environment determines the survival of your psychic energy. Many of us are drained because we operate under the belief that being endlessly available is a moral necessity. Niccolò Machiavelli observed that in the real world, blind kindness is rarely rewarded with respect. It is often seen as a resource to be used. Chronic availability is often a disguised fear of rejection. We tell ourselves we are being nice, but we are actually just afraid of the conflict that arises when we set a firm boundary. Manipulative individuals depend on this predictability. They use your constant accessibility to offload their own emotional chaos, knowing you will provide the validation or reaction they require to avoid facing themselves. This is where strategic silence becomes a tool of self-mastery. By choosing not to offer an immediate response, you disrupt the other person's narrative control. When you refuse to react, the other person is forced to confront their own voice without the comfort of your resistance. This absence of feedback often triggers anxiety in a manipulator. Without your predictable reaction to hide behind, they begin to project their own insecurities into the void you've created. Protecting your availability transforms you from a tool used by others into a sovereign individual. You gain the power to choose where your energy goes, and in doing so, you demand a higher level of respect from those around you. External systems and social boundaries are the walls of the mind, but the identity inside those walls must also be rebuilt. If you are still waiting for an external authority to tell you your life has meaning, the walls will eventually crumble. Carl Jung argued that true strength is not found in a sanitized persona, but in the integration of the shadow, our repressed and uncomfortable nature. Friedrich Nietzsche envisioned the Übermensch, an individual who has the courage to create their own values and bear the weight of radical responsibility alone. This shift in identity is the final piece of the architecture. You stop trying to act differently and begin to exist as someone who is sourced entirely from their own will. Once your environment, your boundaries, and your identity are aligned, your presence changes. You no longer project the neediness that invites manipulation, which can be deeply unsettling to those still living on autopilot. But this level of self-mastery comes with a specific cost. As you move away from herd morality, you inevitably lose the utilitarian friendships and social approval that were built on your former submissiveness. People who benefited from your lack of boundaries will interpret your strength as arrogance. They will often use shame or criticism to try and pull you back into the group, because your autonomy highlights their own complacency. This is the final choice. You can stay in the crowd and remain exhausted by a system that isn't yours, or you can accept the isolation required to possess yourself completely. The architecture is ready.
The question is whether you have the courage to inhabit it.